Hello viewers. In today's video, we will tell you about the moon, what humans saw when they first set foot on it. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. If you are new to our channel, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming exciting videos. Now, let's dive into the video. For more than half a century, one of the most debated events in human history has been the Apollo 11 moon landing. On July 20th, 1969, millions of people around the world watched as Neil Armstrong took that famous giant leap for mankind. But decades later, many still ask the same question: did we really land on the moon, or was it all an elaborate hoax filmed right here on Earth? Let's journey back to the height of the Cold War. It's the 1960s, and the United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a fierce race, not for territory, but for space. The Soviets shocked the world in 1957 by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. Then in 1961, they sent Yuri Gagarin into orbit, making him the first human to travel into space. America was humiliated and desperate to catch up. President John F. Kennedy delivered a bold promise. Before the decade was out, the United States would send a man to the moon and bring him safely back to Earth. It was a declaration of national pride, scientific ambition, and political defiance. But such a task was monumental. NASA faced countless technical hurdles, engineering failures, and tragedies like the Apollo 1 fire that killed 3 astronauts on the launch pad. Yet, by July 1969, NASA claimed to have done it. Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the lunar surface while Michael Collins orbited above. They planted the American flag, collected rocks, and returned as heroes. The footage became legendary: grainy images of astronauts hopping in low gravity, a stark landscape of dust and shadows, and that reflective helmet showing the world's most famous astronaut. But soon after, doubts began to emerge. By the mid-1970s, a surprising number of people started to question the authenticity of the moon landing. Could the US government, under pressure to beat the Soviets, have faked it all? One of the earliest critics was Bill Kaysing, a former employee at NASA contractor company. In his 1974 book, We Never Went to the Moon, Kaysing claimed the US simply didn't have the technology to make it safely to the lunar surface and back. He argued that NASA staged the moon landing in a secret film studio, possibly directed by Stanley Kubrick, who had just released 2001: A Space Odyssey, known for its realistic space visuals. Let's explore some of the most famous pieces of evidence cited by moon landing skeptics. First, the flag. In the footage, the American flag seems to flutter as if caught by wind. But there's no air on the moon. NASA explained that a metal rod ran through the top of the flag, and it only appeared to move because it was being twisted and adjusted by the astronauts. Next, the shadows. Some skeptics point out that the shadows in the photos seem to fall in different directions, suggesting multiple light sources like stage lighting rather than a single sun. NASA's response: the uneven lunar terrain caused shadows to distort in ways that can appear inconsistent. Then there's the issue of stars. In the lunar photographs, the sky appears completely black, with no stars visible. Conspiracy theorists argue that NASA forgot to include that, but scientists explain that the camera exposure was set for the bright lunar surface, making the dimmer stars invisible. One of the biggest arguments concerns radiation. Between Earth and the moon lies the Van Allen radiation belt's a zone of intense radiation that would be deadly to unprotected humans. Skeptics claim that astronauts could not have passed through them safely. NASA countered that the spacecraft traveled through the thinnest parts of the belts and spent too little time there to receive dangerous doses. And then there's the photographic question. The Apollo photos look almost too perfect, sharp, well-framed, and professional. Many believe it would have been impossible to capture such flawless shots in bulky space suits with limited visibility, but others argue that the astronauts were trained extensively and used high-quality Hasselblad cameras designed specifically for lunar conditions. In 1978, Hollywood fueled the conspiracy fire with the film Capricorn 1, a thriller about NASA faking a Mars landing. Suddenly, the idea of a staged space mission didn't seem so far-fetched. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the moon hoax theory gained traction, especially with the rise of the internet. Forums, documentaries, and late-night shows debated it endlessly. In 2001, Fox aired a television special called Conspiracy Theory: Did We Land on the Moon? It reignited public interest, presenting interviews with skeptics who insisted the footage was filmed in a secret studio, perhaps Area 51 or a Hollywood soundstage. NASA, for its part, rarely engaged with these claims. Scientists, engineers, and astronauts dismissed the conspiracies as baseless. They pointed to the thousands of people involved in the Apollo program. Over 400,000 workers from NASA, private contractors, and universities. Could all of them really keep a secret for decades? Then there's the physical evidence. 12 astronauts walked on the moon during 6 missions between 1969 and 1972. They brought back 382 kilograms, over 800 pounds of lunar rock and soil. These samples have been studied worldwide and proven to be unlike any material found on Earth. In 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter captured high-resolution photos of the Apollo landing sites. The images clearly show the footprints, rover tracks, and equipment left behind by the astronauts. For scientists, this ended the debate. For conspiracy theorists, it was just more government fabrication. So why do people still believe in the moon landing hoax? Psychologists say it's a combination of mistrust in authority, love for mystery, and the human tendency to find patterns even when none exist. The 1960s were a turbulent time. The Vietnam War, political assassinations, and social upheaval eroded public faith in government institutions. The idea that NASA staged the landing fit neatly into a broader narrative of deceit. Some also point to the Cold War context. If America's main goal was to prove its superiority to the Soviet Union, faking a moon landing would have been a powerful propaganda tool. The Soviets, however, tracked the Apollo missions using their own radar systems. If the US had faked the landing, they would have exposed it immediately. Instead, they congratulated NASA. There's also the argument of motivation. Why would thousands of scientists, astronauts, and engineers dedicate their lives to maintaining a lie? The logistics of such a cover-up seem impossible. Leaks would have emerged, whistleblowers would have come forward, and in the modern age of digital transparency, the truth would likely have surfaced by now. Still, the moon landing conspiracy refuses to die. Social media and YouTube have given it new life, with videos claiming undeniable proof of studio lighting, mismatched footprints, and suspicious reflections in astronaut helmets. These videos often rack up millions of views, tapping into that same fascination that's kept this theory alive for generations. Even some celebrities have fueled the fire. Musician and filmmaker Buzz Aldrin, often mistaken online for a De Niro, has had to repeatedly defend his place in history, even punching one persistent hoax believer in the face after being called a liar. Ironically, the very success of the Apollo program may have helped breed disbelief. The feat was so astonishing, so far ahead of its time, that some people simply couldn't believe it was real. It felt like science fiction brought to life. Today, With modern technology, we have stronger evidence than ever that humans walked on the moon. Japan's Solini probe and India's Chandrayaan missions both capture independent verification of the Apollo sites. In addition, laser reflectors placed on the moon during Apollo missions still bounce back beams fired from Earth-based observatories. A living experiment continuing to this day. But perhaps the most interesting part of the moon landing conspiracy isn't whether it's true or false. It's why it matters. The story reveals something profound about human nature. We want to believe in great achievements, but we also question them. We seek truth, yet we're drawn to mystery. The moon landing symbolizes both the triumph of human innovation and the limits of human trust. So, did we really go to the moon? The overwhelming evidence says yes, but for some, the doubt itself is what keeps the story alive. Every generation rediscovers the mystery, reshaping it for new audiences. The Apollo 11 moon landing remains one of humanity's greatest accomplishments and one of its most enduring controversies. Because sometimes, what we choose to believe tells us more about ourselves than the event itself.